What's up, everybody? Welcome to the new episode of the House of the Dev podcast. I'm your co-host, Peter Salnikov. We got Raph Colantonio in Texas. Hi,
Hello.
Raph. And right next to him, I can see Matt Piersall, audio director for Weird West, also known for his work as an audio director of Prey and many other cool games, which we will talk about later in this episode. Hi, and thanks for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
You are entering the House of the Dev.
So we obviously are talking video game sounds this time and why original sound matters. This side of the game is oftenly underestimated by the devs, especially beginners. But first, Matt, let's talk about your current work. I mean, your experience goes way beyond Weird West and Prey, but even in this short period of time, like 4 or 5 years, have many things changed regarding game audio technologically and in terms of creative approach?
So within the last 5 years, I would say the biggest change that I've noticed is that, and I think this is industry-wide for every discipline, the largest thing that's changed for me is that because games are distributed in online and you can patch them and everyone's connected to the internet, you don't have the same putting it in the box feel that you used to have. Back in the day when we would actually have to ship the master disc to like Sony or Nintendo or something like that, there was a point at which you would sort of bleed for your art and then put it on the disc, and then the disc would someone would get on a plane somewhere and it'd be this heroic story, and now the process never really ends. You're always kind of creating, you're always working on the project kind of ad nauseum until the game just sort of bleeds out a slow death, So I would say for me that's been the biggest change. Also, the number of games being created now is a lot more. So there's a lot more like signal to noise, there were only a few outlets for press, I guess, maybe 10 years ago or 20 years ago when I started. So, if you got an IGN thing or GameSpot or you got in the Electronic Gaming Monthly magazine, you sort of made it. And nowadays, the press is never ending too. It's a lot more sort of fight for your attention, I guess. So in terms of sound design, I would, in audio for games, I'd say the massive shift has been, you're not really limited anymore in terms of what you do. Like, you can more or less play as many sounds. Like, you used to be very limited by hardware. Like, an example would be, this is kind of a technical thing, but your amount of RAM that you had available to you on the PlayStation 2 was 2 megabytes. So whatever you could fit within 2 megabytes was that was what you had to work with. The Wii, for example, Epic Mickey, we had 6 megs of dedicated RAM. And then so you're constantly loading and unloading stuff.
Could you at least stream?
You could stream, but you could only stream a few things at a time because you do what's called async bank loading.
Yeah, so there was more it's the same with coding. Back in the days, they had to store this over there, put it back in for a second. It's a lot of juggling.
It's kind of like the same technique in art. They'll use a low-res version of something, and then as you get closer, they'll start loading and unloading what's important. But yeah, the game audio job, I would say 10 years ago was more technical than it is now. It's more art now.
Is it though? Because now you worry more. It frees you for more opportunities, right? So it's less technical about juggling, but the technical now is more about how further can you go, because now you can layer stuff together, put some point there that links to this kind of music if you're there, etc.
Certainly, creatively, I would say it's more of a creative job at this point.
Yeah.
And one of the things, I was kind of thinking about this, it's kind of nice because you worry less about the technical sort of limitations, and it almost feels like it's almost like you can hang yourself a little bit easier because you can do anything now.
Oh, you have no constraints now.
Exactly. So if you don't make it killer, then it's on you.
It's on you.
Right.
Yeah, totally.
So it's a time issue. You know, the other thing I think that's changed dramatically is like that, you know, like game audio people were never like, you know how when I work with you or worked on Prey, like I actually put my own sounds in the game, learn the engine and put those in. That's actually a fairly newer thing for an audio person. No one trusted me 20 years ago when I started to put a sound in the game.
Yeah.
Like, and I don't blame them.
That's probably why.
Yeah.
Now you're more experienced.
Yeah.
You know, one thing I've always, as you know, audio is very important to me. Like even as a gamer back in the days, like I was really paying particular attention to audio, and I always said that same thing. Is like audio probably accounts for 50% of the experience,
right?
Even though it's a few percent of the budget.
Sure.
Right. So you are very valuable. You guys are very valuable.
Right.
Now, the part that I always found jarring to me is how audio is often underestimated. Now, of course, not in AAA games, but like, and of course not recently, but for many, many years.
Right.
Like, what a missed opportunity. You could make your game so much better with good audio that is not more expensive than the bad audio that you guys have in your game.
Right, right.
Like talking about either music or just like sound effects in general, or
right.
like spatialization, using 3D things or whatever. You know, it takes the player so much into that world,
right?
For free almost, like not for free, but like we're talking about like 1, 2, 3, 4 people for the duration of the project,
right? Versus
70,
40 artists, you know, yeah, for sure. I think the thing is, and like I've thought about this a lot actually, and I'm glad you brought this up. Like the thing is the way that like how people compare games to movies, the process, and they're like, there was a time in, I say the early 2000s where it's like, games didn't have the full respect of like as an art, right? People are like, your game's art, and that used to be a topic. And I think the thing is like really that like, so I'm going to compare it to movies. I'm going to be that guy. So I'm sorry, everyone. But films started out as an art form. No one ever questioned if art or not, ever. They were just like, I mean, maybe, I think there were some mutterings that like, oh, it's a movie and like the only real art is, fuck you, Shakespeare's only the real art or whatever. I'm sure it's something like that, but I'm sure there were naysayers. There's always haters. Haters, get out. I'm just kidding. But, like, I think that video games, by its very nature, it's software. Software was always business,
Yeah, or toys. Right? Because
exactly.
like you think about arcade machines. I mean, like our arcade machine. Did I say arcane?
You did. That's a great name for the next company. You're just like Arcane Machine.
We remember Pong or whatever.
Right.
And those were not to be taken seriously.
Exactly.
Those were toys. It's fun, but it's not an art. Right.
But it
stayed with us forever.
It's right. Like I mean, the very first video game, like Space War or something like that, which is a really shitty name for a video game. Space War. How long did that take you? Like 2 seconds? But it was like a hobby for somebody that was working on something real. So video games have always, that's the DNA of making a game. And because of that, it does relate to audio, I swear to God. Because of that, sound was seen as kind of like, especially because of the technology.
1 bit.
Exactly. It's like okay, now the fact that we can display a ball going across and like, we're just like, let's high five and let's go grab a couple of beers. But all of a sudden, someone was like, hey, I got an idea. Let's add a beep to it. People were like, oh, fuck, dude, this is mind blowing. Yeah, and like, so games have always kind of had that, like you said like audio is 50% of the experience, and I really appreciate that. I don't agree with you because I really like, to me, it's like, I would have it. I would say 50% of the experience is like the game feel. To me, that's the most important. And then the other 50% can be divided between art and sound. So we're a good 25%. But games account for 2 to 3% of the budget, right?
I mean,
roughly.
like I threw that in the air, but I might be right about that. Mm-hmm. It's
well, if you think about it, like, I don't want to get into, but I'll use a different game, and I'm not going to mention the name of the game. I could, but the game had a $30 million budget, right? And I want to say that between voice acting, my services, and composer, we're looking at probably about 1.3 to 1.5 million for the total.
Yeah. So budget, it's just somewhere there. Yeah, it's like 3%.
Yeah, it's pretty small.
So talking about, you said something like in comparison between movies and games.
Right.
I'm gonna take a risk of saying that making audio for games is actually harder.
Absolutely.
And the reason why I see that personally is that, and specifically and I'm not talking about the cinematics because then that's close to the movie.
Right.
But I'm talking about like the interactive part, and specifically in games that are super system rich, where anything can happen at any time.
That's right.
So you, as an audio guy, if it's a movie, you know that at frame number 1672, there's going to be the footsteps, so you put it on, and then you know that you can duck that part because the voice is coming, etc.
Right.
But and you know exactly when you're gonna send the stinger or the nice music to support some dramatic effect, right?
Exactly.
But like in the games, it can happen at any time, anywhere. You know.
That's right. And so I'm thinking specifically about like what we've done in the Third West, right? That's a systemic game. So, when I remember not really thinking about the stealth in the game. And then I started just kind of playing the game, and all of a sudden I realized like, okay, this stealth mechanic is like pretty intensive in this project. And so my initial instinct was I created a layer. So in this case, every area has a specific kind of sound. And then within each music track, so there's a day and night theme for area type. And then within each of those, there's a stealth layer. And so my idea was like, well, I didn't realize stealth was going to be something that you constantly did. So I created a stealth layer for all these tracks. It's like, it's
the
like
stealth version of it.
Yeah, exactly. So my idea was like, I'm going to make this, every time you go into stealth, you're just going to feel like the coolest satanic cowboy. And what I realized is like once I kept playing the game and I understood the sort of rhythm of the game, like this is too much because you go into stealth all the time. So like you're saying, like when frame 672 put that footstep on there, and then you hear the memory of some sort of like ex-wife, dead person or whatever, you can really craft that moment. And in a game, you have to account for the rhythm of the game always.
Yeah. So the mixing is totally dynamic.
It's incredibly difficult too, because every player is different, and what you do in a game versus like what you would do in a movie is instead of forcing emotion on someone, you suggest it, and you try to. You understand the game as a game, and that's one of the weirdest things because, in a video game, you have this world to craft, and it's like this, it's really compelling. But at the end of the day, you have to think of it like Jenga. It still is a game. It still has rules and a goal and mechanics. You can never forget that. That's the most key thing.
So, speaking about the coolest satanic cowboys, let's talk about inventing sounds. Because, well, we all know that original sounds can create a sense of presence like nothing else. And at the same time, you can basically ruin everything with one generic sound from a library, like some creature screaming or a weapon reload or even a squeaky door, which was heard in tons of games.
The door one.
Doors
I
and
remember
floors.
I've heard
from
those.
Doom.
Yeah. Or I don't know, footsteps from Half-Life and Counter-Strike.
Yeah.
These sounds haunt me. They will haunt me for the rest of my life.
Right. Well, it's funny that you bring up the footsteps. I'm sure you've heard them, but there are these metal footsteps that are like from, I would say, 1995 to 2005. They were basically in every video.
Yeah. Or, for example, the dungeon sewers ambient sound from Quake 1, which is still used in many TV series a lot.
Oh,
Totally.
Yeah.
There's an alarm sound that I hear in probably like most shows.
It's so jarring. Yeah, for me, it's the door sound, the one that goes and every time. I think I've heard it even in a super, like in very expensive shows like the Game of Thrones. I was like, seriously?
Why?
Why? Oh, that's the why.
We only get $1.3 million. Fuck you guys. Get this door.
I tell you what it is. So this is actually, and man, I'm going very inside baseball here. I think it happens, like, this is why I like working with Raph, because he's not like this. But I would say the majority of game directors, they put like we'll use music as a quick example, but this door sound is typically like people put it in as a temp thing, right? Just a real quick temp thing. And then the director comes in and they get married to it. They're like, oh, wait, what happened to that door? They're like, put that in. You know, like how there's a sound, it's like that eagle sound, but it's not an eagle. Like, what's funny, this is so America. Like, the sound that you think of as the America, like, is actually, like, not a hawk or like it's a great, I think it's a hawk. Yeah, it's a chicken. It's not an eagle at all, because eagles sound weird. But what I'm saying is that a director or a game designer will put in a sound as a temp thing, and then the audio person is like, oh, I'm going to make a good version of this. But the designers are like, hey, this is all fucked up now. Like, what happened to this door sound? They just get married to it. That's really what happens. It's rare that the audio person is like, you know what, they don't pay me enough. We only get $1.2 million. and I just want to like shit the bed on this project. It's very rare that happens. Yeah. My daughter was into this weird, super weird show called Monster High. Not like being high, but like they're monsters and they go to a high school. Uh-huh. Yeah. So she was really into this, and she was watching YouTube videos of the playthrough of this thing. And so these girls are in high heels on sand in the desert, and they're playing this like click clack on concrete sound, but they're obviously in the desert. And I thought to myself, I'm like, I know that the audio people just didn't have the time or money to solve this problem. Yeah, exactly. Because it's rare that an audio person always wants to put their best foot forward. Because even if you're working on something like Monster High, you want to be like, I want to work on like Halo after this. But
then I assume as well, like as an audio guy, you've done enough footsteps at this point, and Certainly. They're not very creative. It's not really where you're gonna make the difference, right?
Absolutely,
so it's kind of like it seems reasonable that you'd be tempted to use some banks for those bass sounds, and
Absolutely.
Then like put your energy into the cool ones, right?
And that's the thing. That's what you learn over time. But I would say that this is true of anything. So in sound design, you learn like. It's kind of like when you're a younger developer or a younger artist, I think your tendency is you want to reinvent the wheel every time. Mm-hmm. Because you know how like sometimes the road's being reworked, and the reason the road is being reworked, on your block is because they have to spend the budget, right? Mm-hmm. And so if they don't spend that money, they will lose the budget next year. In the same way, with sound, like, somebody's making Call of Duty 20, and they're like, we got to redo all the footage. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think I'm not saying specifically them. I'm just saying that, like, there is a thing where people just do it because that's the way, whether it's the right way to do it. For me personally, especially now that, like, I have the power to implement my own material and create my own systems and things like that, especially like giving that free reign, I'm much less inclined to worry about whether my footstep came from a library or I recorded it. To be honest, like, it's probably better that it's a library. Like, right. I'm never gonna, like, I don't want to be, when people are like, man, I've never heard footsteps quite this good. Like, that's not really art for me. Yeah. I'd rather people experience the game and be like, well, the vibe of the sound is cool.
What are the type of sounds you prefer to make? Like, you love to make? Like, is it a magic sound? Is it like a weird weapon?
So I like spells. I like spells, and I like UI, user interface.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I do. Well, actually, like the UI, I think is to me, it's emblematic of the entire experience. So, like, I'm thinking about Guitar Hero. When I did the UI for Guitar Hero 3, or was it? I did 3 in World Tour.
Okay.
And so, I recorded, basically, grabbed an amplifier, got a guitar, got a bass, and just sort of plugged and unplugged it and just did the whole rock and roll, taking the gig experience,
Yeah.
So, I cut the UI together, and it's like, I wanted to give you that feeling like you're getting your gear together to go to a gig, right?
Yeah.
And that was their direction as well. With Weird West, I got some boots, belt buckles. I used to wear this belt, like, tragically. I just, it was like a post-divorce belt. It said "Live Free." It was a really tragic time in my life. But I recorded this belt buckle and a bunch of things that kind of, I grew up in Panhandle of Texas. So anything that was kind of reminiscent of that, like evil cowboy kind of thing, I recorded. So I have a big bank of stuff I've recorded. And when I go to make UI for the game, that's the first thing I grab.
Yeah.
And then I find something musical to put in as well. And it's an abstraction. It's an abstraction of the entire experience. So that would probably be my favorite sound to make.
Yeah, I saw you design a sound real time one day using, I can't even remember what the process was, but you had like some weird tools and it would be like, you would take that thing, loop it for that, then stretch it and then like detune it and then it would sound like an explosion. And I was like, damn. And it started with like a note or something.
Yeah.
And I have no idea how you do that. I mean, I do like, I do some music a little bit myself, but like I don't really do sound design for music. And if I want to give an effect, it's more like because I'm screwing around with the things until something funny happen, but it would be hard for me to go with an intention somewhere, like, I'm gonna take this thing and I'm gonna go to a cat sound.
Right.
Good luck with that.
It's something that I think that there's that Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours thing. This concept? Mm-hmm. After 10,000 hours, you have a mastery of something. So
unless you learn wrong for 10,000 hours.
Yeah, exactly. It's like your 10,000 hours is spent like watching a bad television show.
Yeah.
Like I'm really good at it though.
Yeah.
No, I think that when you create anything, there's a moment in which, like when people make visual art, I watch them do that, and that is mind blowing. They were like, I'm like, oh my god, that looks like a whatever they're drawing,
Right.
But for me, it's like, I'd be trying to draw the wolf. At this point, you just kind of, sound design, you get to a point where you think of something. You're like, I need this, and you just, not that you know how to make it, it becomes an instinct. So with that type of example, it's like, what I wanted was like an explosion, but my way of going about it is staying interesting to me, basically.
Yeah. No, that's pretty amazing. What's your... I have one more question, and maybe you have one after that, Peter, as well. What's so let's say, I imagine it's pretty overwhelming, like handling all the audio for a game.
Yeah,
like it's such a big thing, and it's a thing that has tons of moving targets as well. It's not like the game is over, we bring it to you and say, hey Matt, do the audio for this. Like instead it's like, okay man, we're making a game, and by the way, try to figure it out at the same time. And as we have all these features and we have like this content that we don't know if it's gonna stay or not. Good luck. What's your is it chaos? What's your process? This is gonna be a really zen answer.
All right. So buckle up. No, I think that you have to learn to let it go, right?
Okay.
So I'm going to give you an example. Ray, you would text me or send me an email saying, hey, the footsteps are broken. And I'm like, Tien, I'm fucking done. I'm done. I quit, But that's an example because, he would change animations. So he's in his process of perfecting his craft. One way I could have taken it is to get really angry, become upset. But my method it's like, once I quit looking at it as my only form of art, I think like having a hobby outside of it is hugely important. Once you realize like it's a commercial art, it's a job, and even though you're close to it and you want to make it great, it's when someone destroys your work unintentionally, that's just part of their process. And it is chaotic, but it's something that I've just learned to live with and embrace. that's just part of the. And in fact, when someone breaks something now, even though it might be annoying to me in a moment, it gives me a chance to rethink that
right,
thing,
the set itself.
you know?
But like as far as the approach goes, like do you start like, so, you know, there's all this thing coming at you, like systems,
Right.
content, music in the background that you might want to color for the specific experience. Do you go from the specific to the generic? Do you go from big to small? Do you like alternate between all, jump all around?
Oh man, that's a great question. I would say that what I do is like, I'll like take a tiny area, right? So in the case of Prey, I want to say that there was like a test map or something initially. And I was just like, I'm going to work on this creature, right? And so I started to work on like, say, the Mimic. And I actually loved your direction for the Mimic. Like that got me really out of my head. But I started working on the Mimic. But what working on the Mimic did for me was all of a sudden I was like, what's lacking from the experience? And it might be that, okay, I'm fighting it with this weapon, right? And so now I'm doing the weapon. So I'm switching heads to the weapon. And so I'm just trying to create a whole cohesive experience.
So now it's a chain reaction. Like as you need this, now you need that. Oh shit, I forgot about this.
Right, exactly. Like, okay, I picked up ammo, right? To go fight the thing. And now I'm like, well, I need an ammo sound. So I'll switch heads and go do the ammo pickup, figure out how that system works.
Right. So you don't really like when the producer comes in and says like, here is a list of 1,200,000 sounds.
Exactly.
Because it's all disjointed, you know.
The way that I don't like to work is when people try to itemize something in a game, because I don't think the experience is like that.
Yeah, we've talked a bit about this before, yeah.
Right. The more like itemized it is, when they're like, how long does it take you to do a creature? I'm like, I don't know, man. Maybe forever. You know?
So what I wanted to talk to you about is like 11 years ago I had this project. The game was called Disciples 3 Resurrection, and I was doing the whole sound design with my partner. And there was so much magic to support with sound effects that at some point I just ran out of ideas. I mean, when it's like fireballs or lightning rods or something like that, it's pretty easy. But when you come across like 40 abstract, some shitty force spells, how do you actually act?
Oh man, that is a fantastic question, Peter. So, okay.
Thank you.
Again, Zen answer. I worked on this I started my career in television, working on Dragon Ball Z. And, you know, like what was kind of interesting about it is that I kind of got to learn the sort of the Japanese aesthetic, right? About the way they approach the sound for Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z. And, you know, I was doing a sound and I was having a hard time because I had the same problem. So like a fireball is fire, right? A lightning is lightning, water is water. But I was doing a retouch, because I used to do retouches on the show. So they would have a Kamehameha blast, and I would go in and like get more Kamehameha, basically. And someone told me like the way that the Dragon Ball Z world views magic is like you're pulling power from the earth, right? So when you send the blast, it's like you're so powerful that you're gathering energy outside of you. So what I think about like you know, something I said like an example might be like a shadow, right? A shadow spell. Mm-hmm. So you can like turn invisible or something and become like a shadow version of yourself. Like I think my approach would be to think about like what creates a shadow. Well, it's the sun, and then the next thought would be like, well, what's the sun do? Well, it makes things burn and sizzle. So then I might immediately go to the sizzle, right? So I just think about where the magic might come from. I think it's kind of like a heady way to think about it. But like, what energy are you pulling from forces of nature or the forces of even like the other individual to create the magic? There's a trade-off, right? So you get this, you pull the power and then you release the power, right? And so there's a give and take with it on an energetic level. So
it sounds to me, and you know, it's great to hear you talking about it, because I never really thought of it, but it's very similar to, at the end of the day, like when I look at an artist, visual artist, I think, you know, a good one anyway, thinks about the history behind the drawing that is doing.
Absolutely.
As opposed to like just, hey, I'm just gonna do this dragon because it looks cool.
Right.
You know, he's gonna think of where it comes from. You know, what did he have for lunch? You know,
Right, exactly.
And I mean, maybe not, but it's the same thing, right? Like in
Absolutely.
a sense, like you, it's not like, okay, do a spell for hiding in shadows, and you just go like, whoop.
Right.
Instead, you think of like, hold on, where, you know, and that's why I talk about the sound, the sizzling, etc. So it's very, very interesting.
Yeah, like what in that, like in the world that you're in, how would magic actually work?
Yeah,
you know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, so there's more to, you communicate much more than the sound itself communicates like tons of like story behind it.
Exactly,
which is awesome. Yeah.
Exactly.
What I'm sure that's one of the questions you have, Peter. So I'm gonna ask it. What advice? I mean, you know, it's so often that people that do audio, and there are tons of people that do audio out there that not in video games who wants to come into. It's like, you know, how do I make it into video? What's the you know, why can't I make it? So what is the trick? What advice would you give?
I think it's a great question. It's actually a question that I get a lot. Like, I decided to make my company email publicly available. So there was, for the last 20 years, I've basically, here's my resume. How do I get in? I'm sure you get the same thing. And I think now it's sort of easier than ever. I would say, from a practical standpoint, I would say get Unreal Engine. Just get it and actually learn. Like, there's so many things you can do with sound right these days. You know, back when I started, it was the Doom engine, and really hard to even make a level because there wasn't a lot of resources. So you would have to kind of figure out how to do things. But I would just say, you know, get Wise Adventure. Wise Adventure is a great tool because you can like look behind the curtain now. Yeah. There's a lot of mods.
Is it Wise or W-Wise? It's been called Wise now?
Well, it's just two W's, so I just make it one thing. Yeah. Wise.
Something wise.
Yeah. I would just say get Unreal Engine. Get maybe the Wise Adventure project, which is done in Unity. And just like learn the tools behind the scenes, you know, because I think the tools are widely available now. And, you know, quite honestly, make sure it's something you're actually interested in.
For sure.
Because someone can like video games and like music. But, you know, the job is not always the most glamorous thing.
Yeah, and also we will know if it's not your thing.
Absolutely.
And interactive music is not the same as just music. You know, you put all those different layers. And yeah, that's cool. I think a lot of people want to come into the video game world. A lot of musicians, because it's so hard to make money as a musician.
Right.
If it's not associated to something concrete like a game, a movie, ad.
I think a lot of people see a video game, read an article that's like video game industry is $100 billion industry. Like, hey, if I could just get, you know what I mean? Like, you know, and I understand that. I mean, I initially got into it. My mom, you know, I was in a rock band in college and trying music. I remember my mom was, Matt, you should make the music for games because Tyler's like,
big mom.
Yeah, exactly. Because maybe you should make music for video game because like Tyler's playing them, and I just kind of think your music sort of works. And I was like, whatever, Mom, you don't know me. And then, you know, the next thing I know, I'm like...
And you were making $10 a year.
Exactly.
Being a musician.
I know, it's just about, I released an album and we, you know, had a good ride up and we did this like tour. And there was one night where we made $7 for the band. There were 4 of us.
It's even hard to divide.
And I was like, you know what, maybe my mom's right, you know. So I got it, you know... there was an electronic musician magazine. There was an article in the magazine, Sound Design for Fun and Profit. And I literally, my thought process was, I was like, maybe if I can get into that, I can like afford some gear and then I can go be a superstar DJ. But what ended up happening is I got a job on the Dragon Ball at Funimation. And I was like, I'll just do this for like a year and then I'm done. And then like after 2 years, I was like, pretty good. I should probably get into the game part. And I got into video games. I just fell in love with it. But But I mean, I think it's a difficult thing to get into. You know, like anytime someone asks you, like I know your story about how you got in, and it's madness.
Yeah.
Like, you know, you wouldn't. I don't know about you, Peter, but like it's like
crazy.
Yeah, exactly.
Crazy
like
circle of coincidences.
Exactly. Same thing. Yeah.
Every story is a little.
You really have to want to be a game developer.
Yeah.
To be a game developer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's manifestation, I guess.
Absolutely. It's magic, baby.
It's magic.
Yeah.
Believe in it.
Now loading the House of the Dev.
We've talked about your pipelines, your approach, and about library sounds, but there's that thing. Can we talk about field recording? I mean, when do you need it? Because I'm actually. I have some friends who work as lead audio designers on many games here in Russia, and we have our conversations. And I've heard that the original lively sound actually is not needed anymore because you have everything in the basis, royalty-free, or some subscription type libraries, which you just transform and you make up nice sounds, and everyone is okay with this. Or am I wrong?
You're not wrong. But I would say when I started, I think it's good to record your own material just because you want to learn the process, right? It's a part of the process. So if you are a sound designer, I think it's important because the thing that, like, take like a Ben Burt, right? Or like the guy McDonald, the old Disney old guard at Disney. So he was a performative sound designer. He would create devices and watch the cartoon and be like,
yeah, that Foley magic.
Exactly. And so sound design by its very nature is a performative art. And so I think even though there's a billion libraries for everything, you save yourself time and you create better art by recording material because you know the material, you can perform the material, and then you create a much more close relationship with the source material. And by creating a close relationship with the source material, your end art is more compelling. So that's the reason to record. I don't record everything. Like I don't there was a time where I was doing a game that required a lot of guns, and I was going to be the guy that recorded guns, but I don't like guns. Guns freak me out. And I went to the gun range, and this dude was doing this move, like I was just like, oh my god, like okay, I gotta get out of here.
Would you say that a gun?
On the other hand,
the
real life guns sound boring.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah,
yeah.
It's like the fake is probably one better. You know?
Right? Yeah, totally. I heard him in my neighborhood last night. Totally boring. I'm kidding. No, it's like a real gun is just like people have already recorded it, and I don't like to be around them. So, and not that I hate them, but it's just not my favorite thing. So recording a gun is far less compelling. Recording the gun mechanic, though, that's interesting, especially close up. Put a piezo mic, yeah, like that's a compelling thing. So yeah, I would say that to sum up your question, like there's a ton of material, but I think certain material, designer dependent, is going to be more compelling if you record it.
Can we talk about this side of job when we go to piezo mics and we do small and micro sounds? That game that I mentioned before, Disciples 3, we did. It's a turn-based strategy game, pretty similar to Heroes of Might and Magic.
Cool.
And so it's a bird view game, and they had this wonderful. It was like 2009. And the devs gave us this wonderful middleware software when you can rotate the character, make him run, make him stop, make him fall, make him, suffer, and you just, put sounds in special boxes for the timing. And since it was so comfortable and so interesting, I got lost in this process. And like for a simple example, if we have a knight who wears a plate armor, he should sound like a bit, some scratchy sounds. And obviously he wears a chainmail underneath it, so we added those micro metal chain sounds. Then what about his boots? What about his shoulder protection? And it ended up with me standing in front of the microphone with a metal bucket on my head, because I wanted to imitate when the knight gets some damage, I wanted to imitate his screams from underneath his helmet. But when I kind of woke up from this process, I realized that this is a strategy game. It's isometric. We are far away from those guys. And all these units over-detailed by sound effects make no sense, actually. So is there any point when you should look at your work and just stop?
Absolutely. Yes. I love that story, because I've done the same thing. You kind of tend to focus on, you always have to ask yourself the question when you're creating a game: am I doing this for me, or am I doing this for the player, right? And, and believe me, the only reason I know to ask myself that is because I fucked it up so many times. I've oftentimes worked where I just wanted to be a show-off sound designer and not, I worked on, a great example is I worked on Age of Empires. And, this is the definition of a real-time strategy.
God damn it, I wanted to play Age of Empires now.
It's a great game. It's a fun game, but I kind of came into it initially thinking, okay, I'm going to detail everything. And then I play the game, and if you have 30 units doing these actions, it was just really annoying.
Right.
And what it changed the way I designed. All of a sudden, I designed from the God view, the bird view. I'm not thinking about it. Even when there's one unit, it's kind of boring, but that's where the music carries, right? But now when you have 30 units or 50 units and you have this massive battle and things are just happening, now all of a sudden the sound is starting to work, because the whole idea of the game is to create an empire. You know what I mean? So, I would say design for the game and not for you. Sort of. That was my takeaway that I learned. But I've done what you did, so much.
Speaking about the profession of the sound designer, because many of them may be listening to us right now.
Sure.
10 years ago, there were sound designers, field recordists, sound implementators, and many other guys who the profession was kind of shattered between those figures. And now if you want to participate in game development, you need to know, as you said, WISE, WWWise, Unreal Engine or FMOD at the same time. You need not only to create sounds, but also you need to know how to implement them. And the sound designer these days probably combines in functions of a programmer as well.
Sure.
So can we please talk about this? Because the entry cost is pretty high, given the budget.
Right. No, for sure. What I've found is it depends. It's really an industry thing. Meaning that okay, take a studio, we'll just use a big studio that I've had small experience with, like Naughty Dog, right? So Naughty Dog has 22 audio people on their projects, and they have a dialogue person, and they have a UI person, and they have a person that tags footsteps. They have a director, they have somebody that just does ambiances. So for a project of that scope, you have hyper-specific roles. And so if you want to get into a role like that, your approach as an audio person might be, well, for one, move to LA. But kind of get in almost like a studio system, right? But for the average sound designer that's like myself, that's working from home and kind of doing everything, the industry has changed in the way that like audio people used to be kind of like the friend of the guy. I know this guy, he's a friend of mine, he's in this band and the band is not terrible, so we'll hire him as our sound guy. Like that was the industry in the, I would say the 90s, and when I got in the 2000s, early 2000s, like 2000 actually. Yeah, all of a sudden like it's like, oh, I know this guy, he's like has a sampler or
that's how I hired you.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I didn't know you were
He's
that
got a
good.
mic.
Yeah, exactly. No, I mean, it kind of did work like that. And, I think that nowadays it's, a lot more technical. And, you're always expected to be like, oh, he's that guy that's at the bar and he plays and he's like, hey, man, here's some sounds. And, like, these days it's more of like an actual, like, you need to know how to put your material in. Like, that's the job now. So it's much less of, it's a harder profession to get in because I think that the technical bar is much higher these days. So, because so many people want to do it.
Yeah, I mean, even like how you implement sound in Unreal, like using Blueprint, we're talking about close to, it's like programmer logic, even though it's not as complex as C or something. It's still like there's like callbacks and this and like you have to scripting can be pretty intense.
I'll give you an example of like there was this, we dropped it thankfully, but I hope maybe I can say this, if not we can cut it, but there was a time in the Weird West where you could starve, right, while traveling, and it would display like you're starving, kind of like the Oregon Trail, you have dysentery, it's like this.
My favorite
and I
game.
thought, totally, it's a great game. And I had this musical stinger. The problem is that in theory, this image is actually on screen all the time. What the artists do to program it though is to change the opacity on every frame, right? As long as you're starving. So they just change the opacity. So whenever I put in the sound, it played every single frame. And so I was like, okay, well, I have an idea. I'll only do it one time. So I would do it once, but then it would refresh itself. So it would refresh, it goes, and I'm like, okay, well, that's not going to work, right? And so that's, as a sound designer, you have to think like this, right? How's the computer thinking?
Right.
Because the computer is just purely logical, and most of the time you're fighting it. So what I ended up doing is I basically did a single call, and then I forced it to one instance, and then after that, I was just like, okay, this might only play one time in a play session. And that was the problem though. Because like it did work in theory, but I couldn't really work around that. So that's kind of an example of the kind of thing, the ways you have to think. It's really not, you approach it in like a creative way. So my initial approach was, okay, I'm making this starving. I'm gonna make. But then I do the technical side of it. I get it into where it's usable data for the game. And then I actually put it in, and it doesn't work. So my whole process within an hour has been creative and frustrating.
And now you're a programmer, yeah.
Exactly.
But that's also because we are, in the case of All5, a small company, very demanding of you, and it's kind of like you're the kind of talented guy that can do both, right? But in some companies, where you're mentioning Naughty Dog, probably there are people who do sounds that have no idea how it's going to be integrated.
That's correct. Yeah, that's I would say, Peter, to your point, that is more rare, and it's usually only found at the super AAA level.
Super focused guys.
Exactly. Like, because the budgets have also changed.
Yeah. So if you want to apply to like a smaller type of company, indie maybe, then you have to be very multi-hat.
Absolutely.
And if not, if you plan to join EA or something, then there's probably more chances that even if you're just like specific like sound integrator or specific sound designer or specific musician, then you have more of a shot there.
Absolutely. Like I have a guy that's done work with me for many years, and he's an audio guy. He's fantastic. He works on the I guess that's not important, but he not made a sound in about 2 years.
He integrates only.
He's an integrator. Yeah. But it's a massive game. It's a big AAA project with 25 people. He's one of 10 people that get paid well to just implement the material.
Yeah.
And so somebody else goes and records it. Very different process than what I say the other 60 to 80% of the is the putting it in. In fact, with Prey, it was interesting because, you're doing a big game for Bethesda, but really, like, even Elder Scrolls, these guys, there's not really many audio people.
Yeah.
There's a kind of an old school, like, put the sound in, create the sound, build a massive world.
Yeah.
So, Matt, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
I've enjoyed this very much. So much useful information. Thank you. You guys have a nice Sunday. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank
Peter.
you, Peter.
Bye.
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 Now we're gonna eat. We're gonna eat chicken now.
Yeah.
Get stacked, man.
Yeah.
Have a nice one, guys.
Bye.
Yeah.